welcome back to our channel. I am Man.
And I am Wife. Today we're taking a deep dive into the connections between The Phantom Menace and the first episode of Obi Wan Kenobi, so consider this your spoiler warning.
So before we jump into this episode, we're going to do a quick little recap on what's happened in Obi-Wan, bring everyone up to speed. So it starts out with a montage of Star Wars movies 1 through 3, kind of looks at everything that happened with the fall of Anakin Skywalker, the creation of Darth Vader, and the exile of Obi-Wan to watch over Luke, and Leia's being sent to the planet of Alderaan. The movie starts with Obi-Wan in this exile on Tatooine. It shows him watching over Luke and trying to protect him. As the episode progresses, some Inquisitors arrive, and they're hunting Jedi. Now, the Jedi they're hunting manages to escape them, finds Obi-Wan, asks for his assistance in escaping. Obi-Wan tells them that the Jedi are over, refuses to help him. The Jedi ends up getting captured and hung. While that's all going on the planet of Alderaan, we get to see Leia growing up as a princess and her life there. After she has an incident with her cousins that doesn't go very well, she runs into the woods, and she gets captured by some of the Inquisitor's minions as a leverage chip for capturing Obi-Wan. So in a panic, the Organas call Obi-Wan, and they explain that Leia's been captured, and they ask for his help in tracking her down. He refuses, and Bail Organa shows up on Tatooine and convinces him into doing it. And so the episode wraps with Obi-Wan boarding a ship to go track down Leia and bring her back safely.
Thank you so much for that recap, man. Now let's take a deep dive into those connections. The way that we have this episode set up, we're going to talk about parallels we saw between certain characters in Obi-Wan and The Phantom Menace. We're not going to go in chronological order. We're going to go by themes that we saw, because we thought that made a little bit more sense than going chronologically. So that first connection we're going to make is between Leia and Padme. And so in Obi-Wan Kenobi, episode 1, Leia puts a decoy in her costume when she's supposed to be getting ready for the party with her cousins. She wants to be out playing in the woods, so she has one of the servants be in her costume, and her mom comes in and does not find it funny that Leia is not ready for the party.
Mm-hmm. And it's very similar to the scene where in The Phantom Menace, where Padme goes into hiding to protect herself from the Trade Federation. She puts one of her handmaidens in her costume to take her place so that she can have security even when she knows this force is coming. And although the reasons are different, the application of this switch is a nice nod and establishes this connection.
So another similarity that we found is Leia in Obi-Wan Kenobi thanks the droids during the party. One of the droids brings her something to eat or something like that, and she says thank you, and her cousin says that she doesn't need to thank the droid because it's a lower life form. It's just cool to see her character there, and that she's really sweet and cares about all life forms, which is similar to Queen Amidala.
Mm-hmm. In The Phantom Menace, when they're escaping from the Federation blockade, they come under heavy fire and they lose. The shields are going down. One of the droids, the astromech droids, have to go repair the ship. Everyone gets blasted off except for R2. And when he comes back in, the Queen calls her down to his chamber, tells him thank you, and requests that he is clean and taken care of. It is worth noting that in this scene, it is not Padme. She's acting as the handmaiden. It's the decoy that gives the instructions that this droid is to be clean and taken care of. But it is Padme who performs the cleaning and the maintenance on this droid, showing that she has this respect for him and this same feelings and sentiments that we see Leia express in Obi-Wan. The next connection that we see between Padme and Leia is that the arrival into Coruscant in The Phantom Menace is the exact same shots and framing as the arrival into that her cousin makes onto Alderaan in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
Right, it's the same idea, same concept there. The viewpoint is a little bit different, but it's the same point in the episode and in the film. That's just another little cool similarity that we found. Another similarity we found between Leia and Padme we thought was worth mentioning, a little bit of a stretch, but Leia offends her cousin at the party when she calls him a lower life form, which is similar to Padme in The Phantom Menace. She calls for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, who was supposed to be one of her supporters, and so it's just interesting to see how they both kind of offend somebody or betray someone's confidence who they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm. And who is specifically at the greeting. Because Chancellor Valorum's there to greet him, and she's there to greet her cousin, and the same kind of dichotomy ends up coming through. The last connection that we found between Leia and Padme in this episode was that at the end of Obi-Wan, um, Rhea sends mercenaries to capture Leia and take her away to use her as bait for her plan to capture Obi-Wan. In the end of Phantom Menace, we see in the throne room that Padme gets surrounded by droids. They actually have to drop their weapons to surrender, and they're captured for a moment until they're able to find some blasters and blast their way back out. But it's interesting to see that in both cases, towards the end of the film, these characters get captured. Now, in Padme's case, of course, the movie ends with them freeing everyone and with victory, while Leia will be spirited away for a plot hook for the next episode. But it is interesting how at the end that same thing happens to both characters.
Yeah, really interesting. Like mother like daughter, right? So we're gonna move on to the connections that we saw between Luke and Anakin. In Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke, we see shots of him pretending to race like a speeder or a pod or something. He's making the hand motions while Obi-Wan is watching him. But he's not allowed to leave the planet and he's not allowed to fly, which is similar to Anakin in The Phantom Menace. He also really loves flying, but he is not allowed to leave because he's a slave. But he does get to pod race, and we see some really cool shots of him doing that in Phantom Menace.
And both of them will go on to become very talented pilots. It's also interesting that earlier in the episode we see Leia with the same sort of interest in space and interest in this travel. I think it establishes that that's just a predominant feat of the whole Skywalker family, is that they're really interested in space travel and in flying, and that's really neat to see that unity there and to see that connection, especially between Luke and Anakin. It's something that won't get as developed as much throughout the series because we won't see Luke again for several episodes now. But it is nice to see that they had that in the forefront of their minds when doing them as children. Um, the next connection that we saw is between Obi Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. There's a scene in Obi-Wan that kind of seems out of the blue. It's a scene where Obi-Wan comes back from working in the meat shop and he runs into this Jawa that's selling parts. Well, talking to him, he finds out that the parts are just the parts stolen from his home that he's selling back to him, and he's got some other stuff there. And they negotiate back on price fund. He buys the parts back. It's very similar to the negotiations that take place between Qui-Gon Jinn and Watto in The Phantom Menace when they're negotiating over the price and terms of conditions for the parts that he needs, the pod race, Anakin's freedom. All of this comes out of their negotiations, and it's a very similar dynamic that they have.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how Master and Padawan have a connection there. Another connection we saw was between Obi-Wan and Anakin. So Obi-Wan has these disturbing dreams and flashbacks of everything that's happened with Anakin during the first episode, which is similar to The Phantom Menace. Anakin has dreams of becoming a Jedi. He talks about that. And his dreams aren't disturbing necessarily in Phantom Menace, but as the series progresses, his dreams become quite haunting with visions of Padme and everything. So it's just interesting to see that connection there.
Mm-hmm. And it becomes quite important later on. More connections that we saw with Obi-Wan come towards the end of the film. There's a scene where after Leia is captured by the mercenaries, where Bail Organa holograms him up, does his FaceTime, to ask Obi-Wan to be the one to go on the mission to rescue Leia. Obi-Wan refuses, says that he's not that man anymore, that a lot has changed over the years that have passed, and that Bail's going to have to find someone else to do it. He doesn't want to take no for an answer, so Bail Organa shows up in person on Tatooine to convince him that he's the only one that can do it and that it has to be done. Gives him the information he needs, and he accepts the deal. It's very similar to a scene in The Phantom Menace where Padme and her people visit the Gungan sacred place.
Yes, and so Padme tries to, or her decoy tries to convince Boss Nan to join them and help them out, and she fails to convince them. And so Padme steps forward and apologizes for the deception and explains why they need their help, and he agrees to help, which we thought was similar to the Organa's first attempt to convince Obi-Wan to help them, and then the later efforts were successful. Another connection that we saw was when, at the end of Obi-Wan Episode 1, he leaves to go rescue Leia and regain the Force, which we thought was similar to Anakin in Phantom Menace leaving the planet Tatooine to become a Jedi, which has some cool similarities there.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on where even though there's other stuff happening, this ends up being the most important outcome long term for both characters in their story arcs is the decision to leave, the decision to get back in, the beginning of their journeys. Both of them leave behind a person they care about very much. In Obi-Wan's case, he's really worried that something's going to happen to Luke while he's gone. In Anakin's case, he's really worried that something's going to happen to his mother while he's gone. They both have these fear and these doubts about leaving, but they decide to do it anyway, and we see Anakin leave Tatooine. We see him get accepted as a Jedi, start down that path. We see Obi-Wan leave, and one of the closing shots is on him wearing his lightsaber again. He digs it back up, and he's back. And it's neat to see that both of them start down that same journey, um, which will get contrasted on later on when they come back together. We see how different they've become.
So let's talk about the connections that we saw between the Inquisitors and the Sith. This is the parallel that we'll be seeing throughout the entirety of our series here. We saw connections throughout all the episodes. So the first connection we saw is the beginning of Obi Wan Kenobi. The Inquisitors arrive on Tatooine. They try to intimidate the people there. They want information because they're trying to hunt down all the Jedis, which is similar to the beginning of Phantom Menace.
In the beginning of Phantom Menace, we see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan arriving on the Trade Federation cruiser to settle the dispute, and Palpatine orders them to kill the Jedi. They try to do so. The Jedi fight their way out of it. They're able to escape. Similar to how the Jedi at the beginning of Obi-Wan, he's also able to escape. And then both of them get away. They're not quite out of the woods yet, especially in the case of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in the forests of Naboo. But they're a little safer, and they're able to start looking for some help and looking for another way that they can get out of the situation that they're in, much to the shame and the annoyance of those pursuing them.
Exactly. And another connection that we saw is between Owen in the first episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Inquisitor Rhea confronts him and tries to get information about Jedi because she thinks that he knows something, which obviously he does, and Obi-Wan's just standing right around the corner. She threatens Owen and his family, and Owen doesn't give up any information, which is similar to when Darth Maul catches up to Qui-Gon and Anakin while they're trying to get back to the ship to make their escape from Tatooine, and Darth Maul fights Qui-Gon there, which is just really interesting to see that connection because it was a really close call both times.
The next connection that we see is that at the very end of Obi-Wan, Rey makes this hologram call to the mercenaries that have captured Leia, and we realize that she's been the one behind this, pulling the strings the whole time through her hologram communications. The shot on that scene is almost exactly the same as several of the shots of Palpatine communicating with the leaders of the Trade Federation when he's pulling the strings on them to run the whole thing, trying to capture the Jedi, trying to take over Naboo. And of course, later on in the series, we'll realize that he had a lot more going on behind the scenes than just that. But it's very interesting that they draw that parallel between the framing on the shots of the holograms.
Yeah, that is really well done. Another sad connection that we saw is between the Jedi that is hung in the first episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan has the opportunity to help that Jedi, but he ultimately chooses not to, and the Jedi is killed as a result. And in Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon is fighting Darth Maul, and Obi-Wan is watching, and he's stuck behind that wall, and he's watching the fight play out, and Darth Maul kills Qui-Gon Jinn, which is just really sad and heartbreaking for Obi-Wan to watch.
In both cases, it'll end up having a great influence on his next action. In The Phantom Menace, it motivates him to. He makes the promise to Qui-Gon. It motivates him to take on Anakin as his apprentice, and it, I think, helps motivate him a little bit to reseek the Jedi ways as at the end of Obi-Wan when he sets off to go chase Leia. So there were a few other connections that we saw that didn't really fit into any specific theme or character. They were just fun little things that we noticed that we thought we'd include that call back to different things in the films. One of these comes when Rhea is intimidating Owen. There's a lady there who starts speaking up and says that the Empire doesn't exist in the Outer Rim. They don't have any power there. Now this mirrors almost identically dialogue from Shmi Skywalker when she's talking to Qui-Gon and Padme. And Padme says, well, the Republic's anti-slavery laws should prevent slavery from existing out here. And Shmi replies that the Republic doesn't exist in the Outer Rim and that they have no power there either. So I guess it doesn't matter who's in control. The Outer Rim is just the forgotten, neglected part of the galaxy.
Kind of a fun connection there. Another connection that we saw was at the Organa party. Senator Organa is talking to one of the family members there, and he's talking about the taxation of the Outer Rim, and his family member replies, and he says he doesn't want to talk about the taxation of the Outer Rim. He's just there to eat his food, which is a funny connection to the Phantom Menace. In the title crawl of Phantom Menace, it actually mentions the taxation of the Outer Rim.
Which is the whole reason that there's the blockade on Naboo, and the whole deal with the Trade Federation in the first place is over that taxation and those laws. Now, these are all the connections that we caught in the episode. Now, there's a few connections we didn't see. By that we mean connections from things that were present in the Phantom Menace that we didn't see brought over to Obi Wan Kenobi.
The first connection that we didn't see was a climactic final battle. In the Phantom Menace, there's that dramatic battle at the end, with they enlist the help of Jar Jar Binks people, and they eventually come out victorious. But there's not a battle to mirror that at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 1.
And I think part of that is that, whereas the Phantom Menace needs to end on a happy note, it needs to end on things being resolved for the next 10-year time skip. Obi-Wan has to end on things being dire to have a plot hook for the rest of the series. So it makes sense that they didn't have, a big battle of free Leia right at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because then what will we do in the next episode? Gotta leave a little thread there. One of the other things that we didn't see brought over was there's no character that parallels Jar Jar Binks. There was no room for him there, I guess, to have a similar character. I don't know who on Tatooine we could have put in those shoes, but that was absent from the film.
Yes, Obi-Wan Kenobi still has comedic relief despite the lack of a Jar Jar Binks character. Another connection that we didn't see was there was no gambling sequence in Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 1, like there is in The Phantom Menace with Qui-Gon betting about the pod races and trying to win Anakin's freedom.
They do have the training scene, but they just mostly play it straight. So those are all the connections that we found in between The Phantom Menace and Obi-Wan Episode 1, and the connections that we didn't see. If there's any that we missed, be sure to let us know about them down in the comments below and have a discussion about it. We're very excited to continue with this series, and we're looking forward to our next video where we compare Obi-Wan Episode 2 to Attack of the Clones. If you'd like to be notified when that video released, be sure to subscribe and push the bell. Don't forget to leave a like, and may the Force be with you.